when Jesus was asked by his disciples how to pray, when he gave them these words that have turned into the Lord's Prayer, perhaps instead of Jesus giving a prayer that was going to be recited verbatim, instead, maybe Jesus was actually offering a template of prayer, a bare bones outline of how we can pray, but not just for the sake of praying, but with an idea of how we can even approach God and our faith within our daily lives. Now, some of you have already pointed out the fact that in different churches and in Matthew and Luke, the Lord's Prayer changes a little bit, but I wasn't sure as we go into this week of kind of parsing and looking at the third part of our bread, our daily bread. If you realize that in the 50s, it actually almost changed in the 1950s. Yeah, so actually with the Pope, there was this moment when the Pope had made a call out to the Colonel Sanders, who, of course, had chicken from KFC. You can see your faces already. I'm not sure I believe this bit of church history from David, where we really need to question where he went to seminary. And so there's this old story of the Colonel approaching the Pope with this bucket of chicken from KFC, and the Pope invited him in because he had never had chicken from KFC. And so as the story goes, the Colonel sat down with the Pope, and the Pope commented on how wonderful this fried chicken was, and the Colonel said, well, I'm glad you liked it because I have a proposition for you. I have a proposition. I love the church, and I love the Catholic Church, and I would love to give you a large sum of money. But I only have one small favor to ask in return. And so the Pope asked, well, what's a small favor? And the Colonel said, well, instead of saying our daily bread, would you mind changing it to our daily chicken? The Pope said there was no way he could do it. So the Colonel wrote down a figure and passed it over the table, and the Pope looked at it, and he sort of said, no, I can't sell out this line for any amount of money. And so the Colonel kept going back and forth until he doubled the amount, and the Pope said, we really can't just sell out to the highest bidder. And the Colonel said that he understood. The Colonel said, what if I give you this amount of money, but also we could talk about stock options and even a percentage of sales? And the Pope said, well, that is a nice gesture, but I have to take it to the College of Cardinals. This is not something I can just change on my own. So the Colonel understood, and as the story goes on, Colonel Sanders calls for the College of Cardinals. He opens up the doors, he walks in, and he says, now I have got good news and I have bad news. The good news is I may have a wonderful option to solve our deficit issues. But the bad news is we may lose the Wonder Bread account. Okay, I cannot tell you how many times I've told that joke to Erica this week, my wife, and she never laughed once. She would think that would be my first sign. So the question today, as we look at the Lord's Prayer, as Jesus tells his disciples to pray for your daily bread, we know that Jesus is obviously talking more than just simple bread, right? And he must be telling his disciples to pray for something more than just food each and every day. Maybe not. I think it's interesting when we step back and even look at how the word bread has been shaped within our own culture, right? And sometimes we talk about someone in the family being the breadwinner. We talk about bread as being this word for money. How much bread remains, at least in our language, as this powerful symbol that is this provision of our own needs. It's something that nourishes us as individuals. It's something that provides resources for things that maybe we want, or maybe even things that we need. Give us our daily bread. Is that what it's about? Is it a prayer for the things that we want? Now, I want to point out, though, I don't want to set this up as being wrong. I mean, if the first week, if that whole beginning part of Our Father, if that first line right there in the Lord's Prayer, if that is meant as a way for this prayer and this approach to God to be relational, approachable, personal, conversational, then why shouldn't we bring up our own hopes and our own desires in moments of prayer? And I don't necessarily think that it's selfish. I mean, when we are authentic, when we open ourselves up, when we tear down walls as we approach this time of prayer, maybe it's important for us to be honest about our own wants and our desires. Maybe this even leads us to living more thankful lives. I love the quote from Martin Luther as he points out in his large catechism, when you pray for daily bread, you pray for everything that is necessary to enjoy daily bread. In other words, you expand your thoughts to more than flour or the flour bin, for if God did not cause the grain to grow and persevere in the field, we could never take a loaf of bread from the oven to set on the table. And that's Luther's words. And do that when we pray for daily bread, we are praying for all the things that go into making that daily bread. And happy people are thankful people. We're reminded that thankful people are happy people. And first comes this moment of thankfulness that sends us out to be gracious, to live in these lives, to live lives of service. And after all, aren't these crucial to the teachings of Jesus? Aren't these the crucial steps to even being transformative disciples of the world? I do think for Jesus, though, that as he teaches his disciples to pray for daily bread, that there's something else also at work. Maybe something even more communal with this image of bread in Jesus' eyes. And when the children of Israel were freed from slavery in Egypt, they found themselves being chased by the Egyptian army. We know the story of the parting of the sea, don't we? Where the Israelites cross over the water and the water comes back down, crushing the army that is chasing them. In the chapter with Egypt, it comes to a very literal close. This is a moment that often gets celebrated. In the story itself, this is a moment that is celebrated, but their problems were far from over. And today, as Judy read the Exodus story, we find a group of those who are freed from slavery. They're freed from the clutches of Egypt, but their daily struggles are far from over. They're wandering in the desert. They're wondering how they're going to be fed each and every day. How are their livestock? How's their livestock going to be fed and watered? And they begin to grumble. They wanted to go back. They thought it was better to be slaves once again. They complained, yet most of all, they lost hope. It's in the midst of this desperation, this crushing moment, in the midst of these complaints, that God tells Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. And that's the story of how there's manna out in the fields, right? This bread-like substance. The next morning when the dew is lifted, there remains on the ground this small round substance as fine as frost, as the Exodus story says. And when God miraculously feeds the people from heaven, it happens by giving them bread. But here's the thing about manna within the Exodus story the substance that the Israelites live on for 40 years. I mean, the idea of manna is that those who go out to collect the manna, the bread out in the fields, aren't doing it for themselves. They're doing it for their communities. They're bringing it back in. They're sharing it with those that are around them. And they can't hang on to it for more than a day, because as the story goes on, manna only has a very short shelf life, and by the next day, whatever is left over has gone bad, and they have to go back out in the fields to collect it again. I think this is the image that Jesus hearkens as he lays it out before the disciples. Pray for our daily bread. This is the petition in the Lord's Prayer that teaches us to come perhaps to God with these humble spirits, trusting that God will provide. I don't know, maybe it seems somewhat hollow. I mean, as we say the prayer each week, as we pray for our daily bread, isn't there also this tension that we feel? I mean, we pray for our daily bread, knowing that there are those without daily bread, without enough to eat, without enough to live on. I mean, Jesus certainly knew this. But then we go back to the desert, when the morning started, when the dew lifted, reminded of those who go out to collect not just for themselves, but for their communities. They went out to collect for others that were around them, our daily bread. Maybe it's also a reminder that perhaps there truly is enough. When we open ourselves up to give and to share, when we see ourselves as being responsible towards one another, the goal is no longer to collect as much as we can, or how we can have more, but how can we be happy with our daily allotments? And what do we do with that excess? This week, as we go out, maybe the very beginning, understanding this petition, to living out this call, is to look at the world around us, to look at our own lives. Maybe it starts with being thankful for the things that we do have. Maybe it's a recognition of sometimes when we think we don't have enough, maybe there are ways that we are. Maybe there are ways in which we can even give to those who are around us a little more. This is the prayer that Jesus offers to the disciples. Lord, give us our daily bread. And as we go out this week, may we go out with the thought that with bread to eat and friends to eat it with places to meet and people to meet with space of welcome and people to welcome, that we go in God's name, and God meets us along the way, feeds